All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's 10 a.m. Eastern Time here in Boston, and we are continuing with our third presentation of the day. Forrest Hanford is going to talk about our Unity plugin. Our assumption is that people that attend these sessions do have basic Unity experience. So it really is my pleasure to introduce my colleague Forrest Hanford. We work together a lot around a number of our events and initiatives for developers. Forrest is a man who wears many hats here at Affectiva. He is a DevOps engineer. He's also the developer that builds our Unity plugin. He's our gaming evangelist, so Forrest attends many gaming events. For those of you who were at the hackathon, Forrest was our master of ceremonies there. And today, together with Imtiaz Ahmed, Forrest has been the lead organizer of Emotion AI Developer Day. So Forrest, we very much appreciate all the work you've done here for our developer community. And we look forward to having you kick off with your hands-on Unity presentation. So let me hand this mic over to you, and we'll let you get started. Thanks, Forrest.
Great. Thank you, Gabby. Good morning. Emotion AI Developer Day. I hope you're all having an awesome day, and I can't see how many people are in there now. Hopefully there's a lot of you that got stoked up first hearing Rana speak, and then Jay, and now me. So hopefully I won't bring you down from where they brought you up. So we'll see. What I'm doing today is I'm going to show you how to use our Unity plugin based on the Unity Chan demo that we created a while ago. And so first I'm going to show you this video that kind of explains how the Unity Chan plugin works. So here's the video.
This is Steve. Wait, no. This is Steve's avatar. Steve is using the Unity Chan character enhanced by the Affectiva Unity plugin. As soon as the webcam finds his face, the fog clears, and she begins to mimic his emotions. When Steve looks happy, she shows joy. When he looks angry, she shows anger. When he closes his eyes, she does too. When he looks surprised, so does she. You can easily add this technology to your game too.
Wow, that voice sounds really familiar. I don't know who did the voiceover for that. The Unity Chan repo, by the way, so the source code for everything that we'll be looking at today is it's on our GitHub, the Affectiva GitHub, and so this is the path. So it's github.com, Affectiva, Unity Chan. So let's get straight to it. Come on, Unity. Let's make that a little bigger. Here is the scene with Unity Chan, and so she was created, she's an animation that was originally created by Unity of Asia, and she's free on the, that's where I got the animation. We didn't create it ourselves. She already had facial animations that would correspond to emotions, and so what I did was I took those and corresponded them to emotions. The first step really in using our Unity plugin is that first you need to add it to your project. And so to do that, first you need to download it from our developer portal. So that's developer.affectiva.com. So you can download it from the developer portal. And specifically, there's a Unity page there where you can get a copy of it. And once it's been downloaded to your computer, you can then go to Assets. And in here, you go to Import Package, Custom Package, and then you want to find the asset that you downloaded. So this is actually the asset that I downloaded on October 18th. What it'll do is it'll create these two folders, Apdex and Streaming Assets. Now, Streaming Assets, you might actually be using Streaming Assets for something else, and so it's possible that this will be adding to your existing Streaming Assets, but Apdex should, in fact, be unique. Then once you've added that, then I've already added these scripts, but I'm going to show you how to add the scripts. So you would go in, I was doing something with animation earlier. You would go in and you'd say scripts, Apdex, and you will need to add the detector component. So I'm adding this to the main camera in the hierarchy, and you will also need the camera input script. The video file input is if you wanted to process a video file, but I'm not going to cover that in this talk. Okay, so now we have the detector script and the camera input script. So in here, the UI allows you to decide which emotions are you interested in looking at, and then which expressions are you interested in. So here, it's going to default to nothing in both cases. And here I've said disgust, anger, surprise, valence. And so these are the emotions that she already had animations for. Valence, if you're not familiar with it, it's an aggregate of positive and negative emotions. So if valence is a positive value from 0 to 100, then that means somebody, well, 0 is neutral actually, but if it's above 0, then that means somebody's having positive emotions, showing positive emotions with their face, and then if it's negative below 0, then that means that they're having negative emotions. And then in here, I'm also interested in smile and eye closure because she smiles and she does eye closure. So an important note on this is that the more that you turn on in fact, there's an everything option, so you could turn them all on. But the more that you turn on, the more CPU is going to be used. And obviously with your game, video games can be very CPU intensive, and so you just want to be careful about how many you turn on and to only turn on the ones that you absolutely need. So those are the expressions and the emotions for the detector script. Now the camera input script. Now similarly, these values also impact performance. Now for a desktop system, Mac or PC, you can use a sample rate of about 20. Anything higher is really going to be relevant. So what this means is that we're going to be getting 20 frames from the webcam per second and processing them and then looking for those emotions and expressions and returning those metrics via callback functions, which I'll show you soon. So 20 works fine on desktop, but on a mobile platform, you might really want to go somewhere between 5 and 10. When I compiled this specific app for Android, I did it at 10 frames per second. Generally, you're not going to want to go below 5 because you're going to be missing out on some emotions. And generally, going beyond 20 is not really worthwhile because people just aren't going to be expressing that much that you're going to get any more useful information than 20 frames per second. And then the target width and target height. So this is the resolution that you're getting from the webcam. And so, again, this is going to affect CPU processing. I should note this does not affect the GPU. Right now, we are strictly CPU processing. So if you're worried about this interfering with your graphics processing, that's not a problem. However, if you are doing some intense CPU processing, possibly for AI pathfinding, then that could be problematic. So you want to be careful with that. So 640 by 480, good setting for desktop. For mobile, I would recommend cutting it in half. It has to be a 4:3 ratio, and so for mobile, I would say do 320 by 240. So that is what we need to set for the camera. Now on the character herself, we have added this face update script was actually already there. And so what it's doing, and then I've added, the player emotion script. So the player emotion script is what's new. So let's take a look at that. So this was written from scratch just for this demo, but I often kind of copy and paste this from one demo to another because it's very similar to what I've used in other games. And so you might actually want to use this for the basis of your own player emotion script. And so this is to get the player emotions. So first we have these public float values. I have them as public just so I can see them in the debugger. They don't actually have to be public. I'm sorry, they do have to be public because we're referencing them elsewhere. But it's also cool to see them in the debugger. We also have the SPOG system. And so now we have these 3 callback functions. And these are functions that are required for image results listener. So if I was to comment this out and then go back to Unity, we should see an error over in the console. Should see, oh, I didn't save. Live coding. There we go. So this is the error that you would see. So it says player emotions does not implement inherited abstract, member, affects, image results, listener, OnFace found. So these three are all required, but if you don't actually care about when they're called, you could just leave them blank like that. But I do actually care, and I am using them in this demo. So OnFace found is going to be called every time the face is found for the first time. So this is like when the tracking first starts, kind of like what Jay Turco was talking about earlier today. So if I'm facing away, let me turn on the webcam. If I'm facing away from the camera, then it's not going to find me. And then it's when it sees my full face, then it's going to find me, and it will start tracking. And so OnFace found will be called that instant that it first finds the face. Now, the instant that the face is lost, so I cover my face, I look away, then OnFace lost will be called, and so I have things that I want to do here. Now, OnImage results is actually going to be called for every single frame, regardless of whether the face is found or lost. But so we have an array of faces that are passed, and currently our Unity plugin only supports one face, mostly because desktop and mobile really the games are generally suited for single player. In the future, we'll probably be changing that, especially here. I only care about the first face because we're only looking for one face anyway. And then I'm looking at the emotions, and then I'm getting the value for valence, and I'm setting this float value up here. So I'm also setting anger, surprise. There is an amount of autofill that you can use. So you can go in here and you can type, and it'll autofill emotions, expressions. So feature points, that gives you, like it says, the X and Y information about where individual points on your face are. You can get more information about that on our developer portal. And then measurements. So this is information about the pitch, roll, and yaw of the head. So where is the head in 3D space? And so if I was interested in a different expression, I could say dot, and then I have all the options here. Actually, I want that back. I already forgot what it was. It was my eye closure. Okay. So that's how we're getting the emotion data from the callback from OnImage results. So now OnFace lost, I'm setting all of these values to 0 because in my demo, 0 is an important value. So 0 is basically what I'm using for neutral. I'll show you that more later. Here you might actually want to set it to something like null. You might actually want to set the value to null or not a number, something like that. But here I'm setting it to 0 because that means that I'm not getting data, and so I don't want Unity-Chan to interact based on that data. Now also, I've got this fog thing. So what's this fog thing? So I'm using the Unity particle system, and what's happening is that fog will turn on if the face is lost. So what happens is that around Unity's face, Unity-Chan's face, there will be fog that appears, and so it appears all around her. And so the idea is that she can't see you. There's fog, but really it's that she can't see you through the webcam. You're not looking directly at the webcam. You as the player. And then when face is found, the fog is turned off. There's a bit of a delay for it to all clear. I couldn't get it to disappear quite as fast as I'd like to, but it's pretty good considering it's my first time using the particle system from Unity. So that is our player emotions. And also I should point out that up here in the using section, we need to be using aptX, and that's how it knows information about like the autofill information about emotions and expressions, as well as what the face class looks like. So let's move on to face update. So this did exist. This existed in the original version of the Unity-Chan asset that's on the asset store, and I've made changes to it. For example, I'm grabbing the player, and then I'm going to set up the player emotions, but like the animation information was already there. And I added this awake function so that I could find the player in the hierarchy. And then we get the emotions, which then gets tagged to here. So this already existed this on GUI, and this is what this is doing is this is creating a button or a series of buttons. And so those buttons are what you can do to manually have her animate her face. I left them there as reference information. And now down here, if the button is being pressed, then it will cause the animation to happen. But now here's what we're really interested in, where we're dealing with the emotions. And so here I'm looking for the dominant emotion. So I've created this dominant emotion floating point value. And I'm using this max function to figure out what is the dominant emotion. Is it anger, disgust, eye closure, valence, surprise, or smile? So which of these is the most dominant emotion? And then here, now remember how in here I had set things to 0 if there was no face. So here it's saying if there's no dominant emotion, if there's no emotion if the dominant emotion is less than or equal to 5, then we're just going to set the neutral face. So 0 is going to mean neutral, so no face found, neutral. Now here, if the smile value is the dominant emotion, then we're going to then further look and say, is it greater than 60? Is smile greater than 60? So if it is, so she's got 2 smile animations. She's got, actually these look the same. That might be a bug. Okay. So she should have 2 smile animations. And so it should show the 2 smile animations here. I need to make a note to myself. And so it would be like the super smile that's here, and then it would be a regular smile that's here. And then if the dominant emotion is anger, so anger is a little more subtle usually. So usually like a 40 is pretty powerful versus for smile, it's like 60. So here, if it's greater than 40, then it's the super anger. And if it's less than 40, but above this threshold, then we will use the more subtle angry face that she has. For surprise, there's only one animation, so I'm just using that one animation. And disgust, I've set it for 50, so greater than 50, do the super. And so here it was actually called distracted, so we're using the current distracted emotion for disgust. And if it's less than 50, we would use this one. And then valence, if valence is the dominant emotion, then we use this animation. And finally, there's an assumption in the code here, which is that if we get to this point, then we must be using eye close, because otherwise there wouldn't be a dominant emotion and we would have dropped out. So the assumption is that the dominant emotion is eye closure, and so we are using eye closure. If we wanted to doubly check and be a little more secure and make the code a little more maintainable, it could say here, if player emotions dot current eye closure equals the dominant emotion, then do this. But that would have a performance impact, and thus I did not include it because I wanted it to perform as quickly as possible. So that is the basics of how Unity3D is set up to work. So what are the use cases for our Unity plugin? So I just showed you emotion mimicry. So the idea with emotion mimicry is that you could have a multiplayer game where you, as the player, are being emotional. You're like, let's storm the castle, let's kill the dragon. I'm sure Avatar could just be kind of like. So with the emotion mimicry, they can actually have the character portray the emotions that the other players are possibly hearing over the voice audio that's coming through. And so then the character can be animated, and it can add to the realism of the game and help to convey those emotions to the other players. There's also the adaptive gameplay use case, and I created a demo early on called Emo Survival. The way that that works is that it's meant to be a stealth game. If you're having negative emotions, you're going to get attacked by the monsters. If you're having neutral emotions, the monsters are just going to wander around randomly. And if you're having positive emotions, the small monsters are actually going to run away. And if you're showing fear, the big monsters are going to say, "I smell fear," pretty much just like that, because I did the audio. And then there's the game Nevermind. Now, the game Nevermind was created by Flying Mollusk, and the chief mollusk of Flying Mollusk is Erin Reynolds, and she'll actually be speaking later today from 1 to 1:30 on track 2. So I highly recommend checking out her talk if you're interested in adaptive gameplay and biofeedback in gaming. She's going to be talking about that and what they did with Nevermind and what they're doing at Flying Mollusk. So Nevermind is a horror puzzle game. It's rated M for mature. You can buy it for about $20 on Steam. And the way that the game works is that the more stressed you are, the harder the game gets. And it can just use our Unity asset and use the face to determine that stress level. They can also work with biofeedback devices, and they can also work with both at the same time. She'll probably talk more about that in her talk. So again, I recommend you going there, and I'll stop talking about Nevermind and not spoil anything. Now, a face as controller. So this is something that can be really useful when you think of accessibility. So there are a lot of people who have different handicaps, and those handicaps can prevent them from playing video games. And a lot of video games don't take that into account. However, there is a large marketplace for games that take that into account, and there have been studies that have shown that adding accessibility features will increase your sales, specifically if you market that you have added accessibility features. So, for example, if you are strictly using the face as a controller, somebody that's a paraplegic, i.e. they don't have use of their hands, they could control the game with just their face, and that can and has actually been done using our plugin. So Sync is a game that was created by a team of students at RPI, and it's a love story. It's a visual novel. And the way that the game works is that your emotions change the storyline. So if you're feeling one way during parts of it, then the storyline will weave in that direction. But if you're feeling another way, then it'll weave in another direction. Now, I've actually never gone through all of each side because I can never get it right. But my storyline seems to always go to one direction, and there's other storylines. Another thing that it does for Face's controller is that there's a part in the game where you're driving, and if you blink, the car that you're driving will crash. So that's the Face's controller use case. And now there's also playtesting, which is an important use case because obviously it's really important for video games to be play tested and to get information from players about how they feel about the game so that you can improve your game and make it the best game possible and thus hopefully improve sales. So I've created this demo that's available, by the way, Unity3D, Emo Survival, Into the Space. They're all available on the Affectiva account in GitHub. So you can get to all of these demos. Into the Space specifically, we had a blog about, I think it was either earlier this month or last month. And the way that it works is that it's tracking your emotions, and for every frame, it grabs all the emotions and it puts them into a CSV file. And you can also, in the CSV file, put information about, like, where's the player? Has the player been shot? Has the player just destroyed something? Where is the player? Did the player just find the gold? And you can have that information and then take a look at the playtesting data to say, okay, people were upset at this point. Why? And then you can, like, dig deeper into it. I once ran a playtest, and I was looking at the data and I found that when the playtester died, they actually smiled. They were actually happy. I'm like, that's really weird. Like, what is going on? And so what it was is that they had played and then they died, and so that was their first playthrough. And so I asked him, well, why are you smiling after you died? And he said, I'm smiling because this is the moment when I figured out how the game works. And so I was happy because now I understand how the game works, and now I can play it again and do far better. So being able to dig into the data and seeing those spikes and then interacting with the person can get you far better data, because a lot of playtesting now is just based off of surveys, and surveys are going to have bias, especially for video games, because a lot of the playtesters are interested in getting in the video game industry, and so they'll be like, oh yeah, I love that game. Really, they're like, I kind of hated the game, but I'd love to get into this space, so like, yeah, I loved it. And so using our technology, you can get that unbiased feedback. And now I'm going to bring up the question and answer panel and start taking questions. Question from Eva. Okay, she thinks I'm missing the case of mixed emotions and the fact that emotions are very fast. How do I define an emotion being dominant? Right, okay, so yes, you can show multiple emotions at once. And so I didn't do anything with that. So you can show multiple expressions at once, and you can show multiple emotions at once. And so you could make it so that in this case, the avatar responds to that. In this case, I had a limited number of animations to work with, and we don't have any animators on staff, so I couldn't add to them. And so I just basically worked with what I can. And so what I was doing is I was just figuring what is the greatest value that I'm getting, whether it's from an emotion or an expression. And based on whichever the value is that is the greatest expression, that's what I'm choosing to animate based off of. Oh, where can I find this player emotion script? Okay, so you know what? Why don't I just dig into GitHub, because I'm sharing my desktop. So GitHub, Affectiva, Unity3D. So in here, we'll go to Assets, Unity3D, Scripts, Player Emotions. So that's where it is. So it's in the Affectiva repo, Unity3D, and this is being recorded, so you'll be able to get this information later. Assets, Unity3D, Scripts, Player Emotions. And yeah, this can be really useful. I pretty much copy and paste, which I know it's a bad habit, but copy and paste it and then edit it as needed. I used to have a CS teacher that was like, don't copy and paste. He was very English and authoritarian, and the reason he was against copy and pasting is because when you copy and paste, it means you don't usually understand it. Of course, if I'm copy and pasting my own code, it's usually okay, and I actually got him to agree with that. Is the SDK available for academic research under free license? So the SDK is available for anybody that makes less than $1 million a year free. And any institution that makes less than $1 million a year. However, if you're doing paid work for an institution, then you really have to talk to our sales department. And the rest is over my head. Are there any use cases for micro-expressions? So a lot of times we actually get questions about smoothing. So there's no smoothing in this. However, it looks like there is smoothing because the animation has its own smoothing. And so sometimes people, when they first try to use it, show in his presentation at 3:15, and that game actually does use smoothing that I added into the code. And so it's actually in the player emotion script of that code. And so I don't want to give too much away from Tim's thunder later today, but I'm just going to show you that script. So it's called Threaten the Guard. And don't look at the picture because that's a preview, a spoiler. Don't look at the spoiler. And then in Assets, we have Scripts. And then in scripts, we have player emotions. And so here, the smoothing is being done based on just a simple counter. So we have this max smooth count, and then we're counting how many times a person is of a certain emotion. And here we are actually using mixed emotions. But again, I don't want to get too into spoilers. Maybe it slipped past me. Does the Unity3D asset allow? No. So we do not currently allow the use of multiple faces. So our regular SDKs, I'm not sure if the JavaScript one does, because there's a huge performance impact on doing multiple faces. Most of our other SDKs do use multiple faces. So the JavaScript and the Android, iOS, Windows, Linux, they all do allow you to use multiple faces. Right now, the Unity3D asset is hard-coded to use one, partly because of CPU, but partly because we're only available currently on Android, iOS, Windows, and Mac, and those platforms are really generally single-player experiences. I mean, it can be multiplayer games, but it's usually one person is at the computer. Now, we're working on Xbox, and so for Xbox, we will probably be looking into changing that, and we are looking into adding that in the future. Emotions recognition only applicable to humans. It's applicable to big babies. And there we go. It's applicable to babies. There are some animals that we've found it works for, but all of our training data is humans. So all of our machine learning in the cloud is based on humans, and so generally it's going to work best with humans. But faces that look slightly humanish, and I mean, I've been at trade shows where I've shown, we've got this demo, AppTextMe, which does multi-face, and sometimes a sign will look vaguely like a human face, and it'll show up as a face. And so sometimes there are things that like aren't even faces that will show up, but it's pretty rare. And again, the training is based off of humans. If we wanted to, we could train off of an animal, but I don't think that that's a focus of the science team right now. Before suggesting an idea for a game, it's important to understand the why. Why do we implement motion detection in gaming? So, right. So, I mean, I did cover the use cases a little bit, and there are certainly many more use cases. So emotion mimicry. So that's the multiplayer why. Why do I want to know that? I want it because I want my players to have a more immersive experience when they are playing their game, and to feel like they can understand the emotions better of other players. And so adaptive gameplay, I mean, so like a stealth game, I mean, that is why I created Emo Survival. I just love this concept of, like, you play a Tom Clancy game, and you know, first you have to sneak in and you get past the guards, and you know, you've got the fake badge and whatever. But if the guards see you and you're like acting suspiciously, or you're having suspicious emotions, then the guards should, you know, do something about that. And you know, in the game, maybe that means they take out their weapons, they try to arrest you. Maybe it's something more violent, which I don't really want to get into. I like to keep this PG-13-ish. And then in Nevermind, so the game actually gets more difficult based on your stress level. And a lot of people are like, but that's kind of crazy. Like, wouldn't you want it the opposite way? But the idea with Nevermind is that they actually wanted the game, and again, Erin will probably talk about this in her talk, but they want the game, they want you to be calm in order to beat the game. You have to be calm in order to beat that game. And the idea is that that calmness that you have in the game, and maybe have even learned in the game, you will bring to your outside world, to your outside life. And they actually have some studies that they did based on that, and I don't know all the details. That would be great Q&A for her later. But now you might want to do the opposite. So my stepson, he's about 5 years older than my daughter, and they watch My Little Pony together. And this isn't true anymore. They're a bit older than when this used to be true. But when they would watch My Little Pony, he, who's about 4 or 5 years older than my daughter would run and hide behind the couch. You know, think of what people did when they saw Daleks in Doctor Who. Run behind the couch for My Little Pony whenever a scary scene happened. But my daughter would just be sitting there fine. And so adaptive gameplay are harder based on the emotions. Like some people, like maybe me, really like the challenge and don't use cheat codes unless they absolutely have to. Like I've tried this, like tried to beat this section for like 5 hours and it's driving me crazy. I'm going to have to use the cheat codes. But to be able to have that, to like tone down the violence, tone down the horror, increase the lighting, it can make the game more accessible. It can make it more psychologically accessible. And then we're talking about not just handicapped accessibility in terms of physical disabilities, but we're also talking about emotional or psychological issues. So Face is a controller. Like you can have like the movement in the game based on the controller. I personally like to shy away from that because I just feel like it's, I don't know, I think it's great for accessibility for physical. And when you're talking about playing a game on a smartphone, you have limited UI. And if you add, and if you smirk, you get a power up, or if you sneer or smile or grimace, then you get a power up, or you jump or whatever. Like having the camera be able to add those extra controls, because you're very limited in a mobile, especially if you have like a smaller phone. You know, I've got kind of like it's actually too big for me in my opinion, but barely fits in my pocket. Okay, so she's talking about for entertainment. And so, yeah, for entertainment, yeah, so this is kind of an answer that's beyond gameplay, but, you know, you have a track list, you have a music playlist, and it's going to adapt to your emotions. Or you have your television set, and it's going to adapt to your emotions. If you're having a bad day, and it knows that when you're depressed, like you want to see things upbeat. Sometimes people, when they're depressed, they actually want to see things that keep them depressed. So it actually all depends on you. But being able to pick a game, or to pick a level, or to pick media based on the person's emotions, and then thus make the game more immersive, more customized to the individual, it's definitely going to add value to the game or the product, whatever it might be. So yeah, for entertainment, it can be very key to know. So I didn't talk about esports here, but there are some esports companies that are interested in using our technology for excuse me, for determining both the crowd's emotions, and then they can have a mood meter for the crowd, but also for the players. How did that awesome StarCraft player feel when their Zerg fleet got destroyed, and you know, how did the I'm trying to think of a better game example that's more up to date, and I'm totally blanking. Day of the Ancients, yeah. So how does a Dota player feel when they get destroyed, and how does what's the new Blizzard game that I don't play? It's a first-person shooter. Well, whatever that game is, they could also show their moods. Yeah, it's hard to say what will inspire developers. I think each of us have our own inspiration. A lot of the inspiration can be, you know, I want to see something come to life. Like, so creating emo survival, I'm like, you know, I want to see a stealth game that uses us. And again, Erin Reynolds is probably going to speak a lot about how her team made her vision come to life, and why biofeedback was so important. And so a little background, which maybe she'll get into. So her team, so her Flying Mollusk is a team of 4 people. So there's 4 employees, and there's probably some amount of contractors that work on it. And the original members of the team were at USC in California, and it was actually like the basis of a thesis project, and they created like a very small demo. And then after that, they had a, not Indiegogo, but a Kickstarter campaign. And after 3 Kickstarters, oh, it looks like somebody else is actually answering the question by typing. The Kickstarter campaign helped them get started. So I'm going to sign off. Been some great questions, but I want to give some room to make sure that we can successfully switch to Umang's presentation, and also we'll have one of those entertaining polls. I actually never saw who won, Star Trek versus Star Wars. Oh, and by the way, if you want to email me, my name, it's my name, Forrest.Hanford, and that's 1 R at affectiva.com. I think we probably have some aliases that go to me as well, but your best bet is spelling my name correctly, Forrest with 1 R, followed by a period, followed by Hanford at affectiva.com, and that's HANDFORD. The 2 Ds is because they got it wrong on Ellis Island, by the way.